Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we wander into the dusty, slightly awkward corners of ancient hygiene, where humanity's earliest attempts at staying clean after nature's call paint a vivid, if mildly cringe-worthy, picture. Imagine squatting in a sun-baked desert, the air thick with the scent of clay and sweat, as some long-forgotten soul reaches for, what, exactly? A rock? A stick? A leaf that's probably not as soft as it looks? These are the moments that shaped history's less glamorous side, and fair warning, some of these solutions are so rough, they probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off to this tale from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in the cradle of civilization, where humans first traded nomadic wandering for settled villages and, with them, the need to figure out what to do after visiting the latrine. Long before toilet paper graced bathroom shelves, people got creative with whatever the earth offered. In the earliest days, roughly 10,000 years ago, as hunter-gatherers transitioned to farming in places like the Fertile Crescent, hygiene was less about comfort and more about survival. Picture a Neolithic farmer, crouched in a makeshift pit, surrounded by the faint rustle of barley fields. The tools at hand? Whatever lay within arm's reach, sticks, leaves, or even a smooth stone if they were lucky. These weren't just random choices, they were the building blocks of a hygiene culture shaped by environment, necessity, and a touch of human ingenuity. Mainstream history tells us that early humans relied heavily on natural materials. Archaeological digs in ancient settlements, like those in modern-day Iraq, reveal no dedicated bathroom artifacts, but the absence speaks volumes. People used what was abundant: grass in grassy plains, reeds near rivers, or even clumps of dirt in arid regions. These choices weren't documented in grand texts, nobody was carving cuneiform tablets to brag about their wiping technique, but the evidence lies in the patterns of daily life. A quirky tidbit? Some early humans might have used animal bones, polished by time and wear, as makeshift scrapers. Imagine the dedication it took to keep a favorite bone handy for such a task. Talk about a multitool before multitools were cool. Historians still argue whether these early methods were purely practical or held ritual significance. In some cultures, cleanliness tied closely to spiritual purity, and the act of cleansing might have carried symbolic weight. Was that leaf chosen just because it was soft, or did it represent a connection to the land? No one knows for sure, but the debate keeps scholars up at night, much like you're up now, listening to this odd slice of history. Let's zoom in on the Fertile Crescent, where the first cities bloomed around 4000 BCE. Here, in the bustling markets of Mesopotamia, people weren't just inventing writing or the wheel, they were puzzling out how to stay clean in a world without plumbing. Mud was everywhere, baked hard by the sun, and it wasn't just for building houses. Some folks, especially in rural areas, used dried mud clumps as a crude but effective wiping tool. It sounds gritty, and it was, but it got the job done. The sensation? Imagine dragging a warm, rough biscuit across your skin, not exactly spa-worthy, but practical. And here's a light chuckle for you. If you think your Monday's rough, try starting it with a handful of dirt as your only bathroom buddy. The environment dictated everything. In river-heavy regions, like near the Tigris or Euphrates, people turned to water-soaked reeds or even their own hands, rinsed in the current. Water was a luxury, though, and not every settlement had a river on tap. In drier areas, sand became a surprising ally. It's abrasive, sure, but it's also absorbent, and in a pinch, it doubled as a hand cleanser too. The downside? Sand gets everywhere, and not in a fun, beach day way. This reliance on natural materials wasn't just about availability, it was a reflection of a world where waste disposal was a personal affair, not a municipal one. Let's pause for a modern aside. Ever run out of toilet paper and grabbed a tissue or, admit it, a sock in desperation? That's the spirit of ancient hygiene, improvisation. These early humans weren't so different from us, just working with a rougher toolkit. Their solutions were shaped by trial and error, and probably a few uncomfortable lessons. A leaf might look soft, but pick the wrong one, and you're in for a prickly surprise. Poison ivy, anyone? Okay, maybe not that extreme, but you get the idea. As communities grew, so did the need for consistency. In larger settlements, people started standardizing their tools. Enter the humble stick, nature's Swiss Army knife. A smooth branch, maybe stripped of bark, became a go-to for many. It wasn't fancy, but it was reusable, eco-friendly before eco-friendly was a thing. Some might have even carved their sticks for better grip, early ergonomics at its finest. And here's another chuckle. Imagine a village elder proudly passing down their prized wiping stick to the next generation. Son, this served me well, use it wisely. The quirky side of this era comes from speculative finds. Some archaeologists point to small, polished stones found in latrine pits as potential hygiene tools. Were they wiping stones? Ritual objects? Nobody's sure, but the idea of a family wiping rock handed down like an heirloom is oddly endearing. It's a reminder that hygiene, even in its earliest forms, was deeply personal. People took pride in their solutions, even if those solutions were, well, a bit rough around the edges. The sensory world of ancient hygiene was vivid. Picture the crunch of dry grass underfoot, the faint mineral tang of wet clay, or the scratch of a stone smoothed by river water. These weren't just tools, they were extensions of the environment, woven into daily life. A farmer might pause mid-task, grab a handful of straw, and carry on, the rhythm of survival unbroken. There was no shame in it, just practicality. Yet, as civilizations grew, so did their ambitions. If you think a stick or a stone sounds rough, wait until we get to Mesopotamia's next big idea, clay shards with an edge sharp enough to make you wince. This early chapter sets the stage for what's to come. From reeds to rocks, humanity's first hygiene experiments were a mix of grit, ingenuity, and the occasional "what were they thinking" moment. As we move forward, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we didn't mention? Well, keep that same vibe in mind. Ancient people were nothing if not resourceful. The next stop takes us deeper into Mesopotamia, where clay wasn't just for pottery but for, let's say, a more intimate kind of sculpting. For now, picture that Neolithic farmer, stick in hand, squatting under a starry sky, solving one of life's oldest problems with whatever the earth provided. The sun beats down on a Mesopotamian village, its mud brick home shimmering in the heat, as a scribe hurries to a communal latrine, clutching a small, sun-baked clay shard. In the bustling cities of Sumer, around 3000 BCE, where cuneiform tablets record grain trades and epic tales, hygiene takes a gritty turn. The air carries the scent of dust and baked earth, and the Tigris River glints in the distance, too far for most to use its waters for daily cleansing. Instead, the people of this ancient cradle of civilization turn to the land itself, mud, clay, and the occasional smooth stone, to handle life's messier moments. This is no place for delicate sensibilities, it's a world where practicality reigns, and the humble clay shard becomes a surprising star in the story of sanitation. Mainstream history confirms that Mesopotamians, particularly in urban centers like Uruk and Ur, used clay in ways that went beyond pottery or building. Archaeological digs uncover small, palm-sized clay fragments near latrine sites, their edges worn smooth from use. These shards, often broken from discarded pots, were the go-to for personal hygiene. Imagine the scene: a merchant, fresh from bartering barley, squats in a private corner, carefully selecting a shard from a pile. The clay is warm from the sun, its surface rough but effective, scraping away what needs to go. It's not luxurious, but it's abundant. Clay is everywhere in Mesopotamia, as common as sand in a desert. The sensation? Like dragging a dry sponge across skin, functional but far from gentle. The process isn't as simple as it sounds. These shards aren't just grabbed and used, they're often shaped for purpose. Some are deliberately chipped into ovals or rectangles, their edges smooth to avoid, well, let's call it unnecessary discomfort. A quirky tidbit? Some shards bear faint cuneiform marks, suggesting they were recycled from broken tablets. Picture a scribe wiping with a fragment of someone's tax record. Talk about giving bureaucracy a second life. It's a small chuckle-worthy moment, the ancient equivalent of using yesterday's newspaper, but with a lot more grit and a lot less give. Historians still argue whether these clay shards were a universal standard or a regional quirk. Were they used only by the lower classes, while elites had access to softer alternatives like water-soaked reeds? The debate lingers because written records rarely mention such mundane details. Mesopotamian texts wax poetic about gods and kings, not bathroom habits. Yet the sheer number of shards found near latrine pits suggests they were a staple, at least for the masses. The elites, lounging in their ziggurat-adjacent homes, might have had servants fetch water or rarer materials, but for the average Sumerian, clay was the great equalizer. Let's paint the scene further. The latrine itself is a simple affair, a shallow pit dug into the earth, sometimes lined with bricks to keep things tidy. The air is thick with the tang of human waste and the faint sweetness of nearby date palms. A farmer steps in, shard in hand, and does what needs doing. Afterward, the shard is tossed into a pile or buried, disposable, eco-friendly in its own crude way. Some settlements even have communal shard stashes, like an ancient version of a tissue box, though far less inviting. The sound of clay clinking against clay as someone rummages for a good piece adds a peculiar rhythm to daily life. Now, a modern aside, ever tried using something unconventional in a pinch, like a napkin or, don't judge, a stray piece of cardboard? That's the Mesopotamian mindset, but with higher stakes. Clay shards weren't just convenient, they were a cultural fixture, shaped by a land where water was precious and soft materials scarce. The downside? Those shards could crack or splinter, leaving the user with a less than pleasant surprise. And here's another light joke: if you thought your Wi-Fi cutting out was a bad day, try a shard snapping mid-use. Ouch. Water plays a role too, but it's not the star. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are close to some cities, but hauling water for every bathroom trip is impractical for most. Instead, those near rivers might dip their shards in water to soften the scrape or rinse their hands afterward. In drier regions, sand or loose dirt doubles as a cleanser, rubbed between palms like an ancient hand sanitizer. The sensory details are vivid: the gritty texture of clay against skin, the faint crunch of sand underfoot, the distant trickle of a canal too far to be useful. It's a world where hygiene is labor-intensive, a task requiring planning and a strong stomach. The quirky side of Mesopotamian hygiene comes from the occasional find of specialized shards. Some archaeologists speculate that certain clay pieces, found with unusual polish or shape, were personal items, kept by individuals for repeated use. Imagine a craftsman proudly toting his favorite shard, maybe even etched with a crude design, ancient DIY at its finest. It's a reminder that even in 3000 BCE, people found ways to personalize the impersonal, turning a mundane task into something faintly their own. But clay wasn't the only option. In rural areas, where pottery wasn't as plentiful, dried mud clumps served a similar purpose. These were softer than shards but crumbled easily, leaving a dusty residue that clung to skin. Picture a shepherd, miles from the nearest city, grabbing a handful of hardened mud after a long day with the flock. It's messy, sure, but it's what's available. The contrast between urban and rural hygiene highlights Mesopotamia's diversity. Cities like Ur had access to surplus clay, while villages leaned on whatever the land provided. Let's not romanticize it too much. This was a rough system. Clay shards, even smoothed, could irritate skin, and improper cleaning led to infections in a world without antibiotics. The communal latrines, often shared by dozens, were breeding grounds for bacteria, their stench a constant in the Mesopotamian air. Yet, there's a strange ingenuity here. These people took a resource as basic as clay and turned it into a tool for survival. It's not glamorous, but it's clever, a testament to human adaptability. As we move forward, keep that clay shard in mind. It's the gritty cousin of the reeds we'll find in Egypt next. The Mesopotamians didn't just stop at clay, they laid the groundwork for hygiene as a cultural act, one that balanced necessity with whatever scraps of comfort they could muster. The sensory world lingers: the dry scrape of clay, the faint warmth of a shard held too long, the distant hum of a city alive with trade and chatter. It's a far cry from modern toilet paper, but it's a start. And if you're chuckling at the thought of a Sumerian proudly clutching their favorite shard, just wait, things get even wilder when we cross the desert to the Nile. The Nile River glints under a relentless sun, its waters lapping at the edges of a bustling Egyptian village, where a priestess pauses near a reed-choked bank, her hands brushing against the tall, feathery stalks. It's 2500 BCE, and in the land of pharaohs and pyramids, hygiene is as much a ritual as it is a necessity. The air hums with the scent of damp earth and lotus blooms, and the distant chatter of market vendors blends with the soft rustle of papyrus reeds. Here, in ancient Egypt, the river isn't just a lifeline for crops or travel, it's the backbone of cleanliness, offering reeds and water as the go-to tools for personal hygiene. Forget the clay shards of Mesopotamia. Egypt's answer to life's messier moments is softer, wetter, and occasionally steeped in spiritual meaning. Mainstream history points to papyrus reeds as a cornerstone of Egyptian sanitation. These tall, fibrous plants, growing in abundance along the Nile, were harvested for everything from writing scrolls to boats, and yes, bathroom duties. A villager, fresh from a day tending fields, might wade into the shallows, snap off a reed, and use its soft, pithy core to wipe. Soaked in water, the reed becomes spongy, almost towel-like, its texture a far cry from the gritty clay of Sumer. Picture the sensation: cool, damp, and slightly slick, like running a wet washcloth across skin, but with a faint planty smell. It's not plush, but it's a step up from a shard, and in a land where water is plentiful, it's a practical choice. The process is deliberate. Reeds are cut fresh, their ends peeled to expose the soft interior, or sometimes mashed into a pulpy mass for extra absorbency. They are disposable, tossed into the river or a pit after use, biodegrading long before anyone worries about landfills. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians might have used dried reeds, especially in drier regions away from the Nile. These were less pleasant. Imagine wiping with a bundle of stiff straw, but they were lightweight and portable, perfect for a nomad or a worker far from water. A light chuckle for you. Picture a scribe, mid-journey, pulling a dried reed from his satchel like it's his secret weapon. Papyrus scroll? No, this one's for other paperwork. Historians still argue whether reed use was purely practical or tied to Egypt's obsession with purity and ritual. Cleanliness was next to godliness in a culture where priests bathed multiple times a day before entering temples. Were reeds chosen just for their softness, or did their connection to the sacred Nile imbue them with symbolic weight? The debate persists, as no tomb painting proudly depicts a pharaoh's bathroom routine. Yet, the prevalence of reeds in daily life, found in archaeological sites near latrines and homes, suggests they were as common as bread or beer in Egyptian households. Let's set the scene. A typical latrine is a simple affair, a mud brick bench with a hole, often positioned near a canal or a bucket of Nile water. The user, perhaps a potter with clay-stained hands, sits and reaches for a reed, its green tip glistening from a quick dip in the bucket. The air is heavy with the river's earthy tang, mingled with the faint sweetness of nearby date palms. After use, the reed is discarded, sinking into the muddy water or piling up in a corner for later burial. The soundscape is alive, water sloshing, reeds rustling, a distant ibis squawking. It's a world where hygiene feels like a small act of harmony with the Nile's rhythm. Now, a modern aside, ever grabbed a wet wipe in a moment of desperation? That's the Egyptian vibe, but with a natural twist. Reeds were their wet wipes, renewable and river-ready. The catch? They weren't always soft. A poorly peeled reed could leave splinters, and in the dry season, fresh ones were harder to come by. Plus, the Nile's waters weren't always pristine. Parasites loved those warm shallows as much as people did. Still, the system worked, blending practicality with the environment in a way that feels almost elegant compared to Mesopotamia's clay-scraping grit. Water was Egypt's secret weapon. Unlike the Mesopotamians, who rationed their precious river access, Egyptians had the Nile at their doorstep. Many used their hands, dipped in water, alongside or instead of reeds. A farmer might rinse in a canal, letting the current carry away the evidence, while a noble might have a servant pour water from a clay jug. This water-based approach wasn't just about cleanliness, it was a cultural hallmark. Temples had purification pools, and even commoners mimicked this ritualistic rinsing when they could. The sensory details are vivid: the cool splash of Nile water, the slight drag of a reed's pith, the faint squelch of mud underfoot. The quirky side emerges in Egypt's elite circles. Some archaeologists suggest that wealthier households used finely woven linen scraps for wiping, a luxury item softer than reeds but far too costly for the masses. Imagine a noblewoman, her kohl-lined eyes scanning a bustling courtyard, casually reaching for a scrap of linen dyed with indigo. It's the ancient equivalent of splurging on triple-ply toilet paper, status in every wipe. These scraps were likely washed and reused, a rare nod to sustainability in a disposable world. And here's another chuckle: picture a servant's face, tasked with laundering those linens. Clean the sacred cloth probably wasn't their favorite job. But reeds weren't just for wiping, they were part of Egypt's broader hygiene culture. Papyrus was processed into bandages, mats, even early tampons, showing its versatility. In latrines, some households kept reed bundles, tied like bouquets, for communal use. The image is oddly charming, a clay pot stuffed with fresh-cut reeds, like a floral arrangement for the bathroom. Yet, the system had flaws. Reeds could harbor bacteria if not dried properly, and communal latrines, especially in crowded cities like Memphis, were far from sanitary. The Nile gave life, but it also carried risks. Disease was a silent stalker in those warm, wet conditions. The spiritual angle adds depth. Cleanliness was a divine mandate, especially for priests entering temples to honor gods like Osiris or Otha. Reeds, born from the Nile, might have been seen as gifts from Hapi, the river god. Using them wasn't just practical, it was a small act of devotion, aligning the body with the cosmic order. This blend of utility and ritual sets Egypt apart from Mesopotamia's utilitarian clay. It's a reminder that hygiene, even in its humblest forms, carried meaning beyond the act itself. As we leave the Nile's banks, carry the image of that priestess, reed in hand, her movements deliberate under the watchful eye of the gods. Egypt's hygiene was a dance with the river, wet, green, and ritualistic, a far cry from the dusty shards of Sumer. Next, we'll cross to Greece, where pebbles and broken pots take center stage, proving that hygiene can get even more hands-on. For now, feel the Nile's cool touch, hear the reed's soft rustle, and let's glide into the next chapter of this gritty, fascinating tale. The Aegean sun bathes an ancient Greek polis in golden light, where a philosopher, tunic hitched up, crouches in a public latrine, his fingers sifting through a pile of smooth pebbles by his side. It's 500 BCE, and in the cradle of democracy, hygiene takes a rugged, hands-on approach. The air hums with the tang of olive oil and sea salt, mingling with the less pleasant whiff of the communal latrine, where stone benches line the walls like a minimalist agora. Here, in ancient Greece, toilet paper is a distant dream. Instead, the Greeks turned to nature's simplest tools, pebbles, broken pottery, and the occasional splash of water, to tidy up after nature's call. It's a world of grit and ingenuity, where even the act of wiping carries a whiff of philosophical debate. Mainstream history confirms that the Greeks relied heavily on natural and recycled materials for personal hygiene. Archaeological evidence from sites like Athens and Corinth reveals piles of smooth pebbles and ceramic sherds near latrine areas, their edges worn from repeated use. These ostraka, broken pottery fragments, were abundant in a culture that churned out clay pots like a modern factory. Picture a citizen, fresh from a symposium, selecting a pebble or a potsherd from a communal pile. The pebble is cool and smooth, shaped by years in a riverbed. The sherd, jagged but sanded down, offers a sharper edge. The sensation? Like scraping with a flat stone or a dull butter knife, not exactly soothing, but effective enough for a quick cleanup. The process is straightforward but requires finesse. Pebbles, often called pessoi in Greek, are chosen for their size and smoothness. Too big, and they're unwieldy. Too small, and, well, you're in for an awkward fumble. Pottery sherds, meanwhile, are carefully selected or even shaped, their rough edges smoothed by hand or water. These tools are disposable, tossed into a pit or left in a pile for others to use. A quirky tidbit? Some ostraka found in archaeological digs bear scratched names or insults, hinting they doubled as voting tokens in ostracism, the Greek practice of banishing unpopular figures. Imagine wiping with a sherd that says Aristides is a jerk. Talk about multitasking. It's a chuckle-worthy image, your least favorite politician, literally and figuratively, getting the boot. Historians still argue whether these tools were used universally or varied by class and region. Did the elite, lounging in their marble-clad homes, opt for softer alternatives like wool or water-soaked cloths? The debate lingers, as Greek texts, like their Mesopotamian counterparts, rarely bother with such earthy details. Aristophanes might mock a rival's beard, but is silent on bathroom habits. Yet, the sheer volume of pebbles and sherds in latrine sites suggests they were the go-to for most, from sailors to scholars. Let's paint the scene. The public latrine is a social hub, not unlike a modern coffee shop, but with far less appeal. Stone benches, often arranged in rows, accommodate multiple users at once, their chatter echoing off the walls. A merchant, his hands still smelling of fish from the agora, grabs a pebble, its surface cool against his palm. The latrine's floor is slick with water, channeled through clay pipes from a nearby spring. The soundscape is lively, the splash of water, the clink of pebbles dropping into a waste pit, the low hum of conversation about politics or the latest play. It's a place where hygiene meets community, though you'd probably want to hold your breath. A modern aside, ever improvised with something rough in a bathroom emergency, like a scrap of cardboard or a stiff napkin? That's the Greek spirit, but with a side of stoicism. Pebbles and sherds were free, abundant, and effective, but they weren't gentle. A poorly chosen sherd could nick skin, and communal piles weren't exactly sanitary. Plus, those public latrines, shared by dozens, were a petri dish for germs. Good luck staying healthy in flu season. Still, the Greeks made it work, turning everyday objects into tools for survival. Water plays a supporting role. In coastal cities like Piraeus, where springs or aqueducts are accessible, some Greeks rinse their pebbles or hands in water, a nod to cleanliness borrowed from their Egyptian neighbors. Others, in drier inland regions, rely solely on dry scraping, a process as pleasant as it sounds. The sensory details are vivid, the faint clatter of pebbles rolling in a pile, the gritty drag of a sherd across skin, the distant crash of waves against the harbor. It's a tactile world, where hygiene feels like a small battle with the elements. The quirky side shines in the Greeks' approach to communal hygiene. Public latrines, some seating up to 60 people, were architectural marvels, complete with drainage systems and stone benches. They weren't private, but they were practical, designed to keep cities like Athens functional. Imagine a poet, mid-debate about the soul, casually reaching for a sherd while his neighbor pontificates about Socrates. It's a scene that blends the absurd with the everyday, proof that even philosophers had to deal with life's messier side. And here's another light chuckle. Picture a Greek citizen proudly showing off his lucky pebble, polished to perfection from years of use. "This one's my best," he'd say, like it's a prized heirloom. The Greeks' choice of tools reflects their environment and mindset. Pebbles were everywhere, rivers, beaches, and hills provided an endless supply. Pottery, too, was a cultural staple, with broken amphorae and kylixes littering every household. Recycling them for hygiene was a no-brainer, a thrifty move in a world where resources weren't wasted. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Pottery sherds could crack under pressure, and pebbles weren't always as smooth as they looked. The risk of irritation or infection loomed, especially in crowded cities where sanitation lagged behind ambition. There's a cultural layer here, too. The Greeks valued cleanliness, at least in theory. Public baths and gymnasia were social staples, and a clean body was a mark of civility. But bathroom habits were less glamorous, a private act performed in public spaces. The contrast is striking, a culture that birthed democracy and tragedy, yet relied on stones for hygiene. It's a reminder that even the most advanced societies have their rough edges, much like those pottery sherds. As we leave the Greek latrine, carry the image of that philosopher, pebble in hand, pondering life's mysteries while handling its necessities. The Greeks took the clay of Mesopotamia and the reeds of Egypt and made them their own, swapping grit for stones and ritual for pragmatism. Next, we'll cross to Rome, where a sponge on a stick, yes, you heard that right, takes hygiene to a new, slightly unsettling level. For now, feel the cool weight of a pebble, hear the clink of pottery in a dusty pile, and let's ease into the next chapter of this peculiar, tactile tale. The Roman bathhouse buzzes with life, its marble floors slick with steam, as a senator, toga discarded, settles onto a communal latrine bench, reaching for a stick topped with a sea sponge. It's 100 CE, and in the heart of the eternal city, hygiene is a public affair, blending engineering, socializing, and a touch of the bizarre. The air is thick with the scent of olive oil, soap and warm water, undercut by the unmistakable whiff of a busy latrine, where dozens of Romans sit shoulder to shoulder, chatting about gladiators or grain prices. Here, the infamous spongia, a sponge on a stick, reigns supreme, dunked in water or vinegar, as Rome's answer to the pebbles of Greece and the reeds of Egypt. It's practical, reusable, and just a little unsettling, a perfect snapshot of a civilization that loves its creature comforts but isn't afraid to get communal. Mainstream history confirms the spongia as a hallmark of Roman sanitation. Archaeological finds in cities like Pompeii and Ostia reveal latrines with channels of running water and communal sponge sticks, often shared among users. The spongia, or xylospongium, is a simple tool, a wooden stick with a natural sea sponge tied to one end, soaked in water or a vinegar solution to keep it soft and semi-sanitary. Picture a merchant, fresh from the forum, dipping the sponge into a trough of murky water before use. The sensation? Cool, squishy, and slightly slimy, like wiping with a damp kitchen sponge, effective, but you'd rather not think about who used it last. It's a far cry from the gritty pebbles of Greece, but it's not exactly a spa day either. The process is oddly ritualistic. Latrines, often built into bathhouses or public spaces, feature stone benches with neatly spaced holes, sometimes seating up to 50 people at once. A small channel of water runs beneath, flushing waste into a soul system, a marvel of Roman engineering. The spongia is dipped, used, and rinsed in a shared bucket or trough, then left for the next person. A quirky tidbit? Some sponges were likely attached to short sticks for personal use, while others, on longer poles, were communal, passed around like a library book nobody really wants to check out. Here's a light chuckle. Imagine a Roman noble, mid-conversation about Cicero, casually handing the spongia to his neighbor like it's a wine goblet. Your turn, Lucius, don't drop it. Historians still argue whether the spongia was as widespread as we think or if it was mostly an urban phenomenon. Did rural Romans, far from aqueducts, stick to simpler tools like stones or straw? The debate persists because, like their Greek neighbors, Romans didn't write odes to their bathroom habits. Yet, the prevalence of latrine troughs and sponge fragments in cities suggests the spongia was a staple, at least where plumbing thrived. The elite might have had private latrines with personal sponges, but for the masses, sharing was caring, or at least unavoidable. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a lively place, its walls adorned with faded frescoes of gods or dolphins, a nod to Rome's love of flair. A baker, his hands dusted with flour, sits next to a soldier, their banter echoing over the gurgle of water in the channel below. The spongia is dipped into a bucket, its sponge swollen with water, and passed along the bench. The air carries the sharp tang of vinegar, used to clean the sponge between uses, though the hygiene standards are dubious at best. The soundscape is rich, the splash of water, the clatter of sandals on marble, the low hum of gossip about the emperor's latest scandal. It's a place where hygiene meets humanity, equal parts practical and absurd. A modern aside, ever shared a towel at a gym and felt a little gross about it? Multiply that by 10, and you've got the spongia experience. These sponges were reusable, which was eco-friendly but a germ magnet. Vinegar might kill some bacteria, but in a busy latrine, the sponge saw more action than a gladiator in the Colosseum. And here's another chuckle. Picture a Roman kid, dared by friends, sneaking a spongia from the latrine as a prank. The look on his mother's face? Priceless. Water is the backbone of this system. Rome's aqueducts and sews make the spongia possible, supplying constant water to rinse tools and flush waste. In wealthier homes, private latrines might feature a small basin for soaking sponges, while public ones rely on troughs or buckets. Some Romans, especially in drier regions, use dry sponges or even straw, but water is the gold standard. The sensory details are vivid: the cool drip of water from a soaked sponge, the faint creak of the wooden stick, the distant rush of an aqueduct feeding the city's veins. It's a tactile world, where hygiene feels like a small victory over chaos. The quirky side emerges in the spongia's cultural footprint. Roman writers like Martial and Juvenal drop sly references to it, mocking its communal nature or joking about its less than pristine state. One poet even quips about a spongia so foul it's worse than the latrine itself. Ancient Yelp reviews weren't kind. Some archaeologists suggest wealthier Romans used softer materials, like wool or linen, for private use, but the spongia remains iconic, a symbol of Rome's blend of innovation and oddity. Imagine a senator's household, where a silver-tipped spongia sits in a private latrine, the ultimate status symbol for the hygienically inclined. But let's not gloss over the downsides. Shared sponges were a health risk, spreading bacteria in an era without germ theory. Public latrines, for all their engineering, were smelly, crowded, and prone to clogging. The spongia could tear or fray, leaving bits behind, and vinegar wasn't the disinfectant Romans hoped it was. Still, the system reflects Rome's ethos: communal, practical, and a little ostentatious, even in its messiest moments. It's a far cry from the solitary reed wiping of Egypt or the pebble scraping of Greece, but it's uniquely Roman, bold, flawed, and unforgettable. The spongia also hints at Rome's social fabric. Latrines were equalizers, where plebeians and patricians sat side by side, sharing sponges and stories. It's a strange kind of democracy, where everyone's human in the same messy way. The spongia wasn't just a tool, it was a shared experience, a reminder that even in a city of aqueducts and empires, some things never change. And here's one last chuckle. Imagine a Roman engineer, proudly showing off his latrine's flushing system, only to realize the spongia bucket's empty. Back to pebbles, he'd sigh, shaking his head. As we leave the steamy latrine, carry the image of that senator, spongia in hand, navigating the chaos of Rome's public life. The Romans took the gritty tools of their predecessors and added water, engineering, and a dash of communal spirit. Next, we'll cross to ancient China, where bamboo and early paper rewrite the hygiene game, hinting at the soft rolls we know today. For now, feel the damp squish of a sponge, hear the gurgle of a Roman saw, and let's glide into the next chapter of this odd, intimate tale. A scholar in ancient China, his silk robe brushing the wooden floor, pauses in a quiet courtyard, the air heavy with the scent of blooming plum blossoms and the faint creak of bamboo swaying in the breeze. It's 100 CE, during the Han Dynasty, and in the land of calligraphy and Confucian wisdom, hygiene takes a revolutionary leap. The bustling cities of Luoyang and Chang'an hum with merchants and scribes, but in the private corners of homes and palaces, a new tool emerges: bamboo sticks and, for the elite, the earliest whispers of paper. Unlike the communal sponges of Rome or the gritty pebbles of Greece, China's approach is precise, personal, and, dare we say, almost refined. Here, the humble bamboo stick, or chugi, and the luxurious invention of paper begin to reshape what it means to stay clean after nature's call. Mainstream history credits China with inventing paper around 105 CE, traditionally attributed to Cai Lun, a court official who perfected the process of turning mulberry bark, hemp, and rags into thin, pliable sheets. While most know paper for writing, archaeological evidence from Dunhuang and other sites suggests it was also used for hygiene among the elite. Bamboo, however, was the workhorse for the masses. Thin, flat strips of bamboo, shaved smooth and sometimes soaked in water, served as reusable wiping tools. Picture a merchant, pausing in a latrine, selecting a bamboo stick from a neat stack. The sensation? Smooth and cool, like running a polished chopstick across skin, firm but not abrasive, a step up from Rome's soggy sponges. The process is meticulous. Bamboo sticks, often called seashells in later texts, are cut to a specific length, about 6 to 8 inches, and sanded to remove splinters. They are stored in bundles, sometimes in a clay jar beside the latrine, ready for use. After wiping, the stick is rinsed in water or vinegar, dried, and reused, a system that's both sustainable and surprisingly sanitary for the time. A quirky tidbit? Some bamboo sticks were inscribed with poems or proverbs, turning a mundane task into a moment of reflection. Imagine wiping with a stick that reads, "Cleanse the body, clear the mind," a Confucian fortune cookie for the bathroom. Here's a light chuckle. Picture a scholar, mid-wipe, squinting at a poetic stick and muttering, "This better not be my best calligraphy." Historians still argue whether paper was widely used for hygiene in the Han Dynasty or remained a luxury reserved for the imperial court. Paper was expensive, labor-intensive to produce, and primarily used for official documents or art. Did commoners ever touch it, or was it strictly for emperors and nobles? The debate lingers, as surviving texts, like the Book of the Later Han, focus on paper's scholarly uses, not its bathroom applications. Yet, fragments of coarse paper found in latrine pits suggest it was more common than once thought, at least in wealthier households. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a private affair, often a small, roofed chamber in a courtyard, its walls painted with simple ink designs of cranes or mountains. A farmer, his hands still earthy from the fields, sits on a wooden bench, reaching for a bamboo stick from a nearby jar. The air carries the faint scent of rice wine and charcoal smoke, blending with the clean, woody aroma of bamboo. Water trickles in a small basin, ready to rinse the stick or hands. The soundscape is serene, the soft clack of bamboo against clay, the distant strum of a guqin, the rustle of leaves outside. It's a world where hygiene feels like a small act of order in a bustling empire. A modern aside, ever grabbed a reusable straw or utensil and felt vaguely eco-conscious? That's the Chinese vibe, but with higher stakes. Bamboo sticks were sustainable, abundant, and easy to prepare, making them a practical choice in a land rich with bamboo groves. The catch? They required maintenance, rinsing, drying, and occasional resanding to keep them smooth. A poorly cleaned stick could harbor bacteria, and in humid regions, mold was a constant threat. Still, compared to Rome's shared sponges, China's system feels almost modern in its precision. Paper, when used, is a game changer. For the elite, it's a luxury item, soft and absorbent, cut into small squares or strips. Imagine an emperor, reclining in a palace, using a sheet of mulberry paper while his attendants fan him with silk. It's the ancient equivalent of splurging on quilted, triple-ply toilet paper, decadent and exclusive. These early papers weren't the silky sheets of today, they were rough, fibrous, and sometimes flecked with bits of bark, but they were a revelation. The sensory details are vivid, the faint crinkle of paper, the smooth glide of bamboo against skin, the soft splash of water in a rinsing basin. It's a tactile world, where hygiene blends utility with a hint of artistry. The quirky side shines in the cultural context. Chinese texts from later dynasties, like the Tang, mention paper explicitly as a hygiene tool, with one official noting it was preferred by the refined. Some scholars suggest that paper's use for wiping predates its widespread adoption for writing, a claim that flips the narrative of Cai Lun's invention. Imagine the irony. Paper, the backbone of bureaucracy, might have started as a bathroom staple. And here's another chuckle. Picture a courtier, proudly presenting a stack of paper to the emperor, only to realize it's destined for the latrine, not the library. Bamboo, though, remains the star for most. Its versatility is unmatched, used for chopsticks, furniture, and now hygiene, it's China's all-purpose resource. In rural areas, where paper is a distant dream, bamboo sticks are universal, often paired with water for a cleaner finish. Some households even boil their sticks to sterilize them, a nod to China's early grasp of hygiene's link to health. The downside? Bamboo could splinter if not prepared properly, and in crowded cities, latrines weren't always well maintained, leaving a familiar stench in the air. The cultural layer adds depth. Cleanliness in Han China aligns with Confucian ideals of order and propriety. A clean body reflects a disciplined mind. Latrines, even in humble homes, are kept tidy, with bamboo sticks arranged like tools in a workshop. This contrasts sharply with Rome's communal chaos, showing a culture that values privacy and precision. The chugi isn't just a tool, it's a small act of refinement, a moment of calm in a busy world. As we leave the courtyard, carry the image of that scholar, bamboo stick in hand, his movements deliberate under the shade of a plum tree. China's hygiene revolution, with its bamboo and early paper, marks a turning point, blending practicality with innovation. Next, we'll wander to medieval Europe, where straw and leaves take center stage, proving that progress isn't always linear. For now, feel the smooth glide of bamboo, hear the soft crinkle of early paper, and let's ease into the next chapter of this intricate, earthy tale. A chill wind whistles through a medieval European village, its thatched roofs dusted with frost, as a blacksmith, his hands blackened from the forge, ducks into a crude outhouse, reaching for a handful of straw from a nearby pile. It's 1200 CE, and in the patchwork of feudal manors and bustling market towns, hygiene is a rough-and-tumble affair. The air carries the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and the unmistakable tang of an overused latrine pit, where privacy is a luxury and comfort a distant dream. Here, in medieval Europe, toilet paper is centuries away, and people make do with straw, hay, leaves, or whatever else the land provides. It's a messy, scratchy world, a far cry from China's polished bamboo or Rome's communal sponges, but it's got a rugged charm all its own. Mainstream history shows that medieval Europeans relied heavily on organic materials for personal hygiene. Archaeological digs at sites like York and Dublin uncover latrine pits filled with remnants of straw, hay, and leaves, suggesting these were the go-to tools for most. Straw, abundant in agrarian societies, is the default. Cheap, disposable, and just soft enough to get the job done. Picture a peasant, fresh from tending pigs, squatting over a pit and grabbing a fistful of straw from a bundle by the door. The sensation? Dry and prickly, like wiping with a bundle of broom bristles, not exactly gentle, but it beats using your hand. It's a gritty solution for a gritty time, where survival trumps luxury every day. The process is as simple as it sounds. Outhouses, often just wooden shacks over a cesspit, dot the landscape, shared by households or entire villages. Straw or hay is kept in piles, sometimes stuffed into a sack for easy grabbing. After use, it's tossed into the pit, where it mingles with waste until the pit is emptied, usually by some unlucky soul. A quirky tidbit? Some latrines contained moss, prized for its softness and absorbency, especially in northern regions like Scotland. Imagine a villager, smugly hoarding a stash of moss like it's the medieval equivalent of plush toilet paper. Here's a light chuckle. Picture a lord's face when he realizes his prized moss has been pilfered by the stable boy. My soft wipe, gone. Historians still argue whether these materials were used uniformly across classes or if the wealthy had better options. Did nobles in stone castles use finer cloths or imported materials, while peasants stuck to straw? The debate persists because medieval texts, like their ancient counterparts, rarely dwell on such mundane details. Chaucer might spin tales of knights and pilgrims, but his mum on their bathroom habits. Yet, the prevalence of organic debris in latrine pits suggests straw and leaves were universal, with only the very rich dabbling in alternatives like wool scraps or linen. Let's set the scene. The outhouse is a rickety structure, its wooden walls splintered and drafty, the pit below a dark, odorous void. A weaver, her fingers still sticky from dyeing wool, steps in, grabbing a handful of hay from a pile. The air is heavy with the stench of waste, tempered by the faint sweetness of straw and the distant bleat of sheep. The act is quick, wipe, toss, and go, but not without risks. Straw can poke or scratch, and leaves, if not chosen carefully, might harbor insects. The soundscape is raw, the creak of the outhouse door, the rustle of hay, the muffled chatter of villagers outside. It's a world where hygiene is a chore, not a ritual, but it's woven into the rhythm of daily life. A modern aside, ever used a paper towel in a pinch and regretted its roughness? That's the medieval vibe, but with sharper edges. Straw and hay were free and plentiful, but they weren't kind to skin. Leaves, when available, offered a softer touch, but picking the wrong one, say, nettle or thistle, was a lesson in pain. And here's another chuckle. Imagine a monk, mid-prayer, realizing his soft leaf is actually poison ivy. His sermon that day? Probably a bit more fervent. The environment shapes everything. In rural areas, straw is king, harvested from wheat or barley fields and stored in barns. Hay, slightly softer, is a close second, though it's often saved for livestock. Leaves, like oak or beech, are popular in forested regions, especially in autumn when they are plentiful. In urban centers like London or Paris, where greenery is scarce, straw remains the default, carted in from nearby farms. Some towns even have communal latrines, where straw piles are maintained by local workers, a medieval version of restocking the teepee. The sensory details are vivid: the dry crunch of straw underfoot, the faint mildew of damp leaves, the cold bite of a winter outhouse seat. It's a tactile, sometimes uncomfortable world. The quirky side emerges in the occasional use of luxury materials. Wealthier households might use wool scraps or coarse cloth, washed and reused by servants. Imagine a noblewoman, her velvet gown tucked carefully, reaching for a scrap of wool dyed with madder root. It's a small indulgence in a world of rough edges, the medieval equivalent of splurging on scented wipes. Some monasteries, with access to herb gardens, used aromatic leaves like sage or mint, blending hygiene with a touch of herbal flair. Picture a monk, sniffing his mint leaf before use, as if it's a fine wine, medieval aromatherapy at its finest. But let's not sugarcoat it. Medieval latrines were filthy, often overflowing in crowded towns, and straw didn't always do the job well. It could crumble, leaving residue, or stick where it shouldn't, and cesspits bred disease in an era without sanitation standards. The Black Death, looming a century later, thrived in such conditions, a grim reminder of hygiene's stakes. Still, there's ingenuity here. People used what was at hand, adapting to their world with a shrug and a handful of hay. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, a snapshot of a time when life was as raw as the materials they used. The cultural context adds flavor. Cleanliness wasn't a priority in medieval Europe, bathing was rare, and latrines were more about function than finesse. The church, with its focus on spiritual purity, paid little mind to bodily hygiene, leaving people to fend for themselves. Yet, there's a communal spirit in shared outhouses, where neighbors swapped gossip while passing the straw pile. It's a far cry from China's private, poetic bamboo sticks, but it's human in its own messy way. And here's one last chuckle: imagine a knight, fresh from a tournament, struggling to wipe with straw in his armor. Chivalry, he'd grumble, never mentioned this part. As we leave the creaky outhouse, carry the image of that blacksmith, straw in hand, trudging back to the forge under a grey sky. Medieval Europe's hygiene was rough, makeshift, and a little chaotic, but it laid bare the resilience of its people. Next, we'll sail to Viking lands, where wooden scrapes and animal skins bring a warrior's edge to the bathroom game. For now, feel the prickly tickle of straw, hear the groan of a latrine door, and let's drift into the next chapter of this raw, earthy tale. A bitter wind howls across a Viking longhouse, its timber walls creaking under a blanket of snow, as a Norse warrior, his beard flecked with frost, stumps toward a small outhouse, clutching a scrap of animal hide. It's 900 CE, and in the rugged fjords of Scandinavia, hygiene is as tough as the people who brave these icy lands. The air is sharp with the scent of pine, smoked fish, and the pungent whiff of a well-used latrine pit, where warmth is a myth and privacy a rare treat. Here, in the world of longships and sagas, toilet paper is a far-off fantasy. Instead, Vikings wield wooden scrapers, animal skins, and the occasional handful of moss to handle life's messier moments. It's a raw, frost-bitten approach, worlds apart from medieval Europe's straw piles or China's polished bamboo, but it's got a warrior's grit that's hard to ignore. Mainstream history confirms that Vikings used a mix of natural and crafted materials for personal hygiene. Archaeological digs at sites like Jorvik, modern-day York, and Birka reveal latrine pits containing fragments of wood, animal pelts, and moss, pointing to their role in sanitation. Wooden scrapers, often flat sticks or small planks, were a staple, carved smooth to serve as reusable wiping tools. Picture a seafarer, fresh from a raid, squatting in a cramped outhouse and running a wooden scraper across skin. The sensation? Hard and unyielding, like scraping with a dull butter knife, functional, but you'd wince at the thought. It's a stark contrast to the softer straw of medieval Europe, but in a land where trees are plentiful, wood is a Viking's best friend. The process is deliberate and practical. Scrapers are whittled from oak or birch, their edges sanded with stones to avoid splinters. They're kept in the outhouse, sometimes hung on a leather thong for easy access, and rinsed in water or snow after use. Animal skins, often sheep or goat, offer a softer alternative, their woolly texture a rare treat in this harsh world. A quirky tidbit? Some Vikings used seal pelts, prized for their durability and slight waterproofing, especially in coastal settlements. Imagine a chieftain, proudly wiping with a seal skin, as if it's a trophy from a hunt. Here's a light chuckle, picture him boasting, "This pelt's cleaned more battles than my axe." Viking swagger at its finest. Historians still argue whether these tools were universal across Viking society or varied by region and status. Did wealthy jarls use finer materials, like imported cloth from trade routes, while thralls, slaves, stuck to rough wood? The debate lingers, as Norse sagas, like their medieval counterparts, focus on heroic deeds, not bathroom routines. Yet, the consistency of wood and pelt fragments in latrine sites suggests they were widespread, with only the elite dabbling in softer options. The harsh climate likely leveled the playing field. When it's freezing, everyone's grabbing whatever works. Let's set the scene. The outhouse is a squat, timber shack, its roof sagging under snow, the pit below a frozen, odorous abyss. A farmer, his hands calloused from hauling nets, steps in, snagging a wooden scraper from a peg. The air is thick with the stench of waste, tempered by the crisp bite of frost and the faint smokiness of a nearby hearth. He wipes, rinses the scraper in a bucket of icy water, and hangs it back up, his breath clouding in the cold. The soundscape is stark, the crunch of snow underfoot, the scrape of wood on wood, the distant howl of wind across the fjord. It's a world where hygiene is a battle against the elements, fought with grit and resourcefulness. A modern aside, ever used a camping trowel or a rough cloth in the wilderness and felt like a survivalist? That's the Viking spirit, but with frostbite as a bonus. Wooden scrapers and pelts were durable and reusable, perfect for a nomadic people who valued portability. The catch? Wood could splinter if not maintained, and pelts, if not dried properly, turned musty in the damp Scandinavian air. Plus, latrines were often shared, and in cramped longhouses, privacy was a luxury. Good luck finding a moment alone. And here's another chuckle. Imagine a Viking kid, tasked with rinsing the family scraper, muttering, "I'd rather face a bear." Moss plays a surprising role, especially in forested or boggy areas. Soft and absorbent, it's nature's gift to the hygiene-challenged Viking. Sphagnum moss, common in Scandinavia, is plucked from bogs and dried, its spongy texture rivaling modern tissue. Picture a shield maiden, pausing by a latrine, grabbing a handful of moss from a woven basket. It's softer than wood or pelt, with a faint earthy smell, but it's seasonal, hard to come by in winter's grip. The sensory details are vivid. The cold snap of a scraper's edge, the woolly drag of a sheepskin, the damp squish of moss between fingers. It's a tactile, freezing world, where hygiene feels like a small act of defiance against the cold. The quirky side shines in the Vikings' resourcefulness. Some scrapers were carved with runes or simple designs, turning a utilitarian tool into a personal artifact. Imagine a warrior etching his initials into a scraper, claiming it like a prized blade, Viking DIY at its peak. In wealthier households, pelts might be treated with fish oil to soften them, a trick borrowed from boat making. Picture a jarl's wife, daintily using an oiled sealskin, while her thrall scrubs the family's wooden scrapers. It's a glimpse of status in an otherwise egalitarian latrine, where everyone's shivering in the same drafty shack. But it's not all rugged charm. Viking latrines were grim, often just pits dug near the longhouse, their contents freezing in winter or festering in summer. Wooden scrapers could wear down, leaving rough edges, and pelts weren't always cleaned thoroughly, spreading germs in tight-knit communities. Disease was a constant threat, especially on long sea voyages where hygiene took a backseat to survival. Still, there's a raw ingenuity here. Vikings took the wooden hides of their world and turned them into tools for living, proving that even in the harshest conditions, humans adapt. The cultural layer adds depth. Cleanliness wasn't a Viking priority, bathing was occasional, often in hot springs or icy rivers, but hygiene still mattered, especially before feasts or rituals. The Norse gods, like Odin or Freya, valued strength, not spotlessness, but a clean warrior was a ready one. Latrines, though crude, were part of communal life, where families shared tools and stories. It's a far cry from China's poetic bamboo or Rome's social sponges, but it's Viking to the core, tough, practical, and unapologetic. And here's one last chuckle. Picture a Viking skald, mid-saga, pausing to grab a scraper, only to weave its heroic use into his tale. And lo, he vanquished the pit. As we leave the icy outhouse, carry the image of that warrior, pelt in hand, trudging back to the longhouse under a starlit sky. Viking hygiene was as harsh as their world, built on wood, hides, and sheer willpower. Next, we'll cross to the Americas, where Mayan corncobs bring a new world twist to the hygiene story. For now, feel the cold bite of a wooden scraper, hear the crunch of snow, and let's drift into the next chapter of this wild, frost-bitten tale. The tropical sun beats down on a Mayan city, its stone pyramids piercing the jungle canopy, as a weaver, her hands dyed with cochineal, slips into a shaded latrine, reaching for a dried corncob tucked in a woven basket. It's 700 CE, and in the vibrant heart of Mesoamerica, where maize is both sustenance and sacred, hygiene takes a distinctly local flavor. The air hums with the scent of copal incense, blooming orchids, and the faint musk of a nearby cenote, mingling with the earthy whiff of a communal latrine. Here, in the world of ball courts and star charts, toilet paper is a foreign concept. Instead, the Maya turned to corncobs, leaves, and the occasional splash of water to tidy up after nature's call. It's a practical, plant-based system, far removed from Viking pelts or Chinese bamboo, but it's rooted in a culture where corn is king. Mainstream history highlights the Mayas' reliance on maize not just for food but for daily life, including hygiene. Archaeological digs at sites like Tikal and Köppen uncover latrine pits with corncob remnants, their fibrous texture suggesting use as a wiping tool. Corncobs, stripped of kernels and dried, are abundant in a society that reveres maize as a gift from the gods. Picture a farmer, fresh from tending milpa fields, squatting over a stone-lined pit and grabbing a corncob. The sensation? Rough and fibrous, like wiping with a loofah, scratchy but absorbent, a practical choice in a land lush with crops. It's a far cry from the smooth bamboo of China, but it's uniquely Mayan, tied to the rhythms of agriculture. The process is straightforward but thoughtful. Corncobs are harvested, dekerneled, and sun-dried until firm, their spongy core ideal for wiping. They are stored in baskets or piled near latrines, often shared by a household or community. After use, the cob is tossed into the pit or composted, returning to the earth in a cycle as old as the Maya themselves. A quirky tidbit? Some cobs were softened in water before use, especially in wealthier homes, to reduce their roughness. Imagine a noble, dipping a corncob in a clay bowl of water, as if preparing a delicacy. Here's a light chuckle. Picture him inspecting the cob like a fine cigar, muttering, "This one's got potential." Historians still argue whether corncobs were the primary hygiene tool across Mayan society or if they were supplemented by other materials like leaves or bark. Did elite priests, with access to exotic goods, use softer alternatives, while commoners stuck to cobs? The debate persists, as Mayan codices, like their Norse or medieval counterparts, focus on rituals and astronomy, not bathroom habits. Yet, the prevalence of corncob fragments in latrine sites suggests they were a staple, especially in rural areas where maize was life itself. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a simple structure, often a stone bench or a dug pit near a family compound, shaded by saber trees. A potter, her fingers sticky with clay, steps in, grabbing a corncob from a basket woven with palm fronds. The air is heavy with the latrine's odor, softened by the sweet tang of nearby cacao groves and the distant splash of a cenote. She wipes, tosses the cob into the pit, and rinses her hands in a gourd of water. The soundscape is alive, the rustle of palm leaves, the faint chirp of jungle birds, the low hum of a marketplace beyond the trees. It's a world where hygiene is a quiet act, woven into the pulse of a thriving civilization. A modern aside, ever used a natural sponge or a rough cloth and felt oddly connected to the earth? That's the Mayan vibe, but with a corn-centric twist. Corncobs were free, renewable, and tied to the harvest, making them a perfect fit for a maize-based culture. The catch? They could be abrasive, especially if not dried properly, and in humid jungles, mold was a risk. Plus, communal latrines weren't always clean, and parasites thrived in the warm, damp climate. Still, the system worked, blending practicality with a reverence for the land. Leaves play a supporting role, especially in forested areas. Broad, soft leaves from plants like banana or fig trees offer a gentle alternative to cobs, their waxy surface a natural barrier against mess. Picture a scribe, pausing by a latrine, plucking a fresh banana leaf from a nearby tree. It's softer than a cob, with a faint green scent, but it's less durable, tearing under pressure. The sensory details are vivid: the fibrous scrape of a corncob, the cool slickness of a leaf, the warm trickle of water from a gourd. It's a lush, tactile world, where hygiene feels like a small communion with the jungle. The quirky side emerges in the Maya's holistic use of maize. Corn wasn't just food or a wiping tool, it was divine, linked to the creation myth where humans were shaped from maize dough. Using corncobs for hygiene might have carried symbolic weight, a humble act tying the body to the gods. Some archaeologists suggest elite households used maize husks, dried, softened outer leaves of the cob, for a plusher wipe. Imagine a priest, preparing for a ritual, using a husk as if it's a sacred relic. It's the Mayan equivalent of luxury teepee, a nod to status in a latrine pit. And here's another chuckle. Picture a merchant, haggling over cacao beans, only to realize his premium husk is just a regular cob. I paid extra for this. Water is a key player, especially near cenotes or rivers. Many Maya rinse their hands or soak cobs in water, a practice rooted in a culture that values ritual purity. Temples have cleansing pools for priests, and even commoners mimic this with gourds or clay jars. In drier regions, like the northern Yucatan, water is scarcer, and dry cobs or leaves dominate. The downside? Latrines, often shared, breed bacteria, and the tropical climate amplifies health risks. Still, there's ingenuity here. Corn cobs are a byproduct of every harvest, turning waste into utility with a farmer's pragmatism. The cultural layer adds depth. The Maya see hygiene as part of balance, aligning the body with the cosmos. Latrines, though practical, are kept tidy, with cobs and leaves arranged like offerings. This contrasts with Viking ruggedness or medieval Europe's chaos, showing a culture where even the mundane has meaning. The corn cob isn't just a tool, it's a link to the maize god, a small act of gratitude for the harvest. And here's one last chuckle. Imagine a Mayan kid, tasked with collecting cobs, sneaking one to play with, only to hear, "That's not a toy, it's for the latrine." As we leave the jungle-shaded latrine, carry the image of that weaver, corncob in hand, stepping back into the sunlit city. The Maya's hygiene, built on maize and reverence, is a testament to their bond with the land. Next, we'll journey to ancient India, where water and hands redefine cleanliness with a ritualistic grace. For now, feel the rough scrape of a corncob, hear the rustle of jungle leaves, and let's glide into the next chapter of this vibrant, earthy tale. The Ganges River shimmers under a golden dawn, its waters lapping at the ghats of an ancient Indian city, as a spice merchant, his hands fragrant with turmeric, steps into a simple latrine, a clay pot of water at his side. It's 500 CE, in the heart of the Gupta Empire, where temples rise in sandstone splendor and the air hums with the scent of sandalwood, jasmine, and the faint musk of a well-trodden latrine. Here, in a land where purity is both spiritual and physical, toilet paper is an alien notion. Instead, the people of ancient India rely on water and their own hands, a practice rooted in ritual, practicality, and a deep connection to the natural world. It's a fluid, cleansing approach, worlds apart from Mayan corncobs or Viking scrapers, but it carries a grace that's distinctly South Asian. Mainstream history confirms that water-based hygiene was a cornerstone of ancient Indian culture. Texts like the Manusmriti and archaeological evidence from sites like Taxila and Harappa reveal a preference for water and hand cleansing, often paired with natural materials like leaves or smooth stones. In a region blessed with rivers, wells, and monsoons, water is abundant, making it the go-to tool for personal hygiene. Picture a scholar, fresh from studying the Vedas, squatting by a latrine and pouring water from a lota, a small, spouted vessel, over his hand. The sensation? Cool and refreshing, like a gentle stream washing away the day's dust, leaving skin clean and slick. It's a far cry from the scratchy cobs of the Maya, but it requires skill and a steady pour. The process is deliberate, almost meditative. Latrines, often simple pits or stone-lined chambers, are built near water sources or equipped with a clay pot for rinsing. The left hand is used for wiping, the right reserved for eating and greeting, a cultural divide still observed today. Water is poured slowly, cleansing hand and body in one fluid motion, then the hand is scrubbed with ash or soil for extra cleanliness. A quirky tidbit? Some households use neem leaves, prized for their antibacterial properties, to supplement water, adding a medicinal touch to the routine. Imagine a priest, plucking a neem leaf to wipe, its bitter scent lingering like a natural sanitizer. Here's a light chuckle. Picture him sniffing the leaf first, as if checking its freshness, muttering, "This one's got healing vibes." Historians still argue whether water-based cleansing was universal across India's diverse regions or if drier areas relied more on dry materials like leaves or stones. Did the elite, with access to private baths, use finer tools like cloth scraps, while commoners stuck to water and hands? The debate lingers, as ancient texts focus on rituals and laws, not bathroom specifics. Yet, the prevalence of lotas and water vessels in archaeological sites suggests water was king, especially in river-rich regions like the Gangetic Plains. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a modest affair, a clay-lined pit tucked behind a mud brick home, shaded by a banyan tree. A weaver, her sari hitched up, steps in, lota in hand, its copper surface glinting in the sunlight. The air is thick with the latrine's earthy odor, softened by the sweet waft of nearby marigolds and the distant chant of morning prayers. She pours water, wipes with her hand, and scrubs with a pinch of ash from a nearby fire. The soundscape is soothing, the soft splash of water, the rustle of leaves overhead, the faint clink of bangles as she moves. It's a world where hygiene feels like a small ritual, aligning body and soul with the flow of water. A modern aside, ever used a bidet and felt oddly refreshed, like you've cracked some secret to cleanliness? That's the Indian vibe, but with a hands-on twist. Water was abundant, free, and tied to cultural ideals of purity, making it a natural choice. The catch? It required access to clean water, which wasn't guaranteed in arid regions or during droughts. Plus, poorly maintained latrines could spread disease, especially in crowded cities. Still, the system was elegant in its simplicity, turning a mundane act into a moment of renewal. Leaves and stones play a supporting role, especially where water is scarce. Broad leaves from banana or peepal trees offer a soft, disposable option, their waxy texture a gentle alternative to water. Smooth river stones, polished by years in the current, are used in drier regions, their cool surface a decent stand-in for Viking scrapers. The sensory details are vivid, the cool trickle of water from a lota, the faint bitterness of a neem leaf, the gritty scrub of ash against skin. It's a fluid, tactile world, where hygiene feels like a dance with nature's elements. The quirky side shines in the use of natural antiseptics. Neem, turmeric, and even cow dung, believed to have medicinal properties, were sometimes used to clean hands or latrine surfaces, blending hygiene with traditional medicine. Imagine a merchant's wife, smearing a pinch of turmeric paste on her hands post-wipe, her fingers glowing yellow as she hums a tune. It's the ancient equivalent of using aloe-infused wipes, a nod to health in a world without germ theory. And here's another chuckle. Picture a kid, tasked with fetching water, sneaking a sip from the lota, only to hear, "That's for the latrine, not your lunch." The cultural layer is profound. In ancient India, cleanliness is tied to spiritual purity, especially in Hinduism and early Buddhism. The Manusmriti and other texts prescribe washing rituals to maintain ritual purity, particularly for priests and those entering sacred spaces. Latrines are kept separate from living areas, and water is seen as a purifier, washing away both physical and spiritual impurities. This reverence for water sets India apart from the material-heavy systems of Europe or the Americas, aligning hygiene with cosmic order. The lota isn't just a tool, it's a vessel of purity, a small act of devotion in a daily routine. But there are downsides. Communal latrines, especially in urban centers, are often unsanitary, breeding grounds for parasites in a warm, humid climate. Water quality varies. Rivers like the Ganges are sacred but not always clean. And in rural areas, finding enough water for daily rinsing can be a chore, forcing reliance on less effective tools like dry leaves. Still, there's ingenuity here. The hand and water method is adaptable, requiring no special materials beyond a pot and a river, and it's sustainable in a way that Viking pelts or Mayan cobs could never be. The system reflects India's diversity. In coastal regions, like modern-day Kerala, coconut shells or husks might supplement water, their fibrous texture a local twist. In the arid northwest, stones and sand take over, echoing Mesopotamian grit. Wherever you go, the left hand remains the constant, a cultural norm that binds the subcontinent's many peoples. And here's one last chuckle. Imagine a traveler, new to the custom, mixing up left and right hands at a feast, earning glares from the table. Rookie mistake, the locals would sigh. As we leave the shaded latrine, carry the image of that merchant, lota in hand, stepping back into the bustle of the city under a mango tree's dappled shade. India's water-based hygiene, with its ritualistic grace, is a testament to a culture where purity flows like the Ganges. Next, we'll journey to ancient Japan, where wooden sticks bring precision and artistry to the bathroom. For now, feel the cool splash of water, hear the soft clink of a copper lota, and let's glide into the next chapter of this flowing, sacred tale. A soft breeze rustles the cherry blossoms outside a Kyoto home, their petals drifting past a wooden latrine where a samurai, his kimono carefully folded, reaches for a slender bamboo stick from a lacquered holder. It's 1000 CE, in the Heian period of Japan, where elegance and ritual permeate even the most mundane acts. The air carries the faint scent of cedar, incense, and the subtle earthiness of a well-kept latrine, a private sanctuary in a culture that prizes precision. Here, in a land of poetry and tea ceremonies, toilet paper is yet to arrive. Instead, the Japanese wield chugi, thin, polished wooden sticks, as their tool of choice for personal hygiene. It's a refined, almost artistic approach, a far cry from India's flowing water or Mayan corncobs, but it fits a society where every gesture carries meaning. Mainstream history confirms that chugi sticks were a staple of Japanese hygiene, particularly from the Heian period onward. Archaeological finds in Nara and Kyoto uncover these slender sticks, often made of bamboo or cypress, in latrine pits alongside written records describing their use. Crafted with care, chugi are shaved to a smooth, flat shape, about 6 inches long, and stored in bundles for easy access. Picture a courtier, fresh from composing a waka poem, stepping into a latrine and selecting a stick with the same deliberation as choosing a calligraphy brush. The sensation? Smooth and precise, like gliding a polished chopstick across skin, gentle yet firm, a marked improvement over Viking scrapers' roughness. The process is meticulous, reflecting Japan's love of order. Chugi are carved to a uniform size, their edges sanded to avoid splinters, and often soaked in water for a softer touch. After use, they are rinsed in a basin or stream, dried, and reused, stored neatly in a holder or box. A quirky tidbit? Some chugi were inscribed with delicate carvings or poetry, turning a humble tool into a small work of art. Imagine a noblewoman, wiping with a stick etched with a haiku about cherry blossoms, blending hygiene with aesthetics. Here's a light chuckle. Picture her pausing mid-wipe to admire the carving, murmuring, "This stick's got better taste than my husband." Historians still argue whether chugi were used across all social classes or if peasants relied on cruder alternatives like leaves or straw. Did the aristocracy, with their refined sensibilities, reserve the finest sticks, while commoners made do with rougher materials? The debate lingers, as Heian period texts, like the Pillow Book, focus on courtly life, not bathroom details. Yet, the prevalence of chugi in archaeological sites, from palaces to villages, suggests they were widely used, their craftsmanship varying by wealth and status. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a small, wooden structure, its shoji screens filtering soft light, the floor swept clean of dust. A merchant, his sandals left at the door, steps in, selecting a chugi from a lacquered box. The air is clean, tinged with the woody scent of cypress and the faint sweetness of blossoms outside. He wipes, rinses the stick in a ceramic basin, and returns it to its place, the act as deliberate as a tea ceremony. The soundscape is serene, the trickle of water, the creak of bamboo walls, the distant pluck of a koto string. It's a world where hygiene feels like a small act of artistry, woven into the fabric of daily life. A modern aside, ever used a high-end reusable utensil and felt a twinge of sophistication? That's the Japanese vibe, but with a bathroom twist. Chugi were sustainable, crafted from abundant bamboo or cypress, and their reusability aligned with a culture that valued resourcefulness. The catch? They required careful maintenance, rinsing, drying, and occasional resanding to keep them smooth. A poorly cleaned stick could harbor bacteria, and in humid Japan, mold was a constant foe. Still, compared to India's hands-on water method, chugi offered a precision that feels almost modern. Water plays a supporting role. Many latrines, especially in urban homes, have basins or nearby streams for rinsing sticks or hands, echoing India's water-based cleansing but with a more structured approach. In rural areas, where water is less accessible, dry sticks dominate, sometimes paired with soft leaves for a gentler finish. The sensory details are vivid, the cool glide of a polished stick, the faint splash of water in a basin, the woody aroma of freshly cut bamboo. It's a tactile, orderly world, where hygiene feels like a quiet ritual of refinement. The quirky side shines in the artistry of chugi. Some were crafted by skilled artisans, their surfaces polished to a sheen or decorated with lacquer. In elite households, chugi might be stored in ornate boxes, a status symbol as much as a tool. Imagine a samurai, his katana resting nearby, using a stick crafted by the same hands that made his sword scabbard, hygiene as high craft. Some texts even suggest chugi were gifted during festivals, a peculiar but practical offering. And here's another chuckle. Picture a courtier, receiving a beautifully carved chugi, bowing deeply, only to realize its purpose. For my poetry sessions, he'd stammer, blushing. The cultural layer runs deep. In Heian Japan, cleanliness aligns with Shinto ideals of purity and harmony. Latrines are kept spotless, their wooden surfaces scrubbed daily, reflecting a belief that a clean body honors the kami, spirits. This reverence for order sets Japan apart from the chaotic latrines of medieval Europe or the earthy pragmatism of the Maya. The chugi isn't just a tool, it's a symbol of discipline, a small act of respect in a culture where even the mundane is elevated. Private latrines, common in noble homes, contrast with India's communal setups, showing a preference for solitude in intimate moments. But there are drawbacks. Chugi requires skill to use without discomfort, and a poorly crafted stick could splinter, causing irritation. Communal latrines in villages, though rare, are less sanitary, and in Japan's humid climate, bacteria thrive if tools aren't properly cleaned. Still, the system is ingenious. Bamboo is abundant, and the craftsmanship of chugi reflects a society that finds beauty in utility. Compared to Viking pelts or Mayan cobs, it's a refined solution, a precursor to the paper-based hygiene Japan would later pioneer. The broader context adds flavor. By the Heian period, Japan is already experimenting with early forms of paper, but it's too precious for widespread hygiene use, reserved for calligraphy or Buddhist sutras. Chugi bridged the gap, offering a practical, reusable tool that fits a culture of precision. In rural areas, leaves or straw might supplement sticks, especially for peasants, but chugi remained the gold standard, their sleek design a testament to Japanese ingenuity. And here's one last chuckle: imagine a monk, mid-meditation, grabbing a chugi only to find it's carved with a rival's name. Even in the latrine, no peace, he'd sigh. As we leave the polished latrine, carry the image of that samurai, chugi in hand, stepping back into the cherry blossom shade with a warrior's poise. Japan's hygiene, with its elegant sticks and ritualistic care, is a masterclass in blending form and function. Next, we'll journey to the Islamic world, where stones and water align with religious purity in a system both practical and profound. For now, feel the smooth glide of bamboo, hear the soft trickle of water, and let's drift into the next chapter of this delicate, artful tale. A desert breeze stirs the palm fronds outside a bustling Baghdad market, where a trader, his robes dusted with sand, steps into a modest latrine, a handful of smooth stones clutched in his hand. It's 900 CE, in the heart of the Islamic Golden Age, where minarets pierce the sky and scholars debate astronomy under flickering oil lamps. The air hums with the scent of frankincense, grilled lamb, and the faint, earthy whiff of a well-used latrine, tucked discreetly behind a mud brick wall. Here, in the Islamic world, toilet paper remains a distant innovation. Instead, people rely on stones, water, and an unwavering commitment to purity to manage personal hygiene. It's a disciplined, ritualistic system, distinct from Japan's polished chugi or India's flowing lotus, but it's deeply rooted in faith and practicality. Mainstream history confirms that stones and water were central to hygiene in the early Islamic world. Islamic texts, including hadiths, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, emphasize cleanliness, prescribing specific practices for personal care. Archaeological sites in cities like Damascus and Cordoba reveal latrine areas with piles of smooth stones, often river-worn or hand-polished, alongside water vessels like ewers or clay jugs. Picture a scholar, pausing from copying a manuscript, squatting over a latrine pit and selecting a small, flat stone. The sensation? Cool and unyielding, like rubbing a smooth pebble across skin, effective but requiring precision, a stark contrast to the soft bamboo of Japan. The process is guided by religious principles. The left hand is used for wiping, often with 3 stones for thoroughness, as prescribed in some hadiths. Water, when available, follows, poured from a jug or dipped from a basin to rinse the hand and body. Stones are discarded into the pit or washed for reuse, depending on local custom. A quirky tidbit? Some stones were chosen for their shape, oval or slightly curved, for better grip, almost like an early ergonomic design. Imagine a merchant proudly carrying his favorite set of stones in a small pouch, as if they are lucky charms. Here's a light chuckle: picture him showing them off at the market, boasting, "These stones have seen more of me than my wife." Historians still argue whether stones were the primary tool across the vast Islamic world or if regional variations favored other materials like clay or wood in water-scarce areas. Did urban elites, with access to private baths, use finer tools like cloth scraps, while rural communities stuck to stones? The debate persists, as religious texts focus on ritual purity rather than specific tools, and archaeological records vary by region. Yet, the abundance of stones in latrine sites, from the Levant to Al-Andalus, suggests they were a cornerstone of hygiene, especially in arid regions where water was precious. Let's set the scene. The latrine is a simple, screened-off corner, its walls adorned with geometric tiles, a nod to Islamic artistry. A weaver, her fingers stained with indigo, steps in, grabbing 3 stones from a neat pile. The air is heavy with the latrine's musk, softened by the faint scent of rosewater from a nearby hammam. She wipes with the stones, pours water from a copper ewer, and scrubs her hand with a pinch of sand for good measure. The soundscape is vibrant, the trickle of water, the clink of stones dropping into the pit, the distant call to prayer echoing over rooftops. It's a world where hygiene is a sacred act, blending faith with function. A modern aside: ever used a minimalist tool, like a reusable water bottle, and felt oddly efficient? That's the Islamic world's vibe, but with a spiritual edge. Stones were abundant, free, and aligned with religious mandates for cleanliness, making them a perfect fit. The catch? They required skill to use without discomfort, and in crowded urban latrines, sanitation was a challenge. Water, when used, was a blessing, but in desert regions, it was rationed, forcing reliance on dry stones. Still, the system was practical, tying hygiene to the rhythms of faith and environment. Water is a star player, especially in cities with aqueducts or wells. Following the stones, a rinse with water, often poured from a lotus-like ewer, ensures cleanliness, aligning with Islamic teachings that water purifies both body and soul. In rural or arid areas, sand or dry clay might substitute, echoing Mesopotamian grit but with a religious purpose. The sensory details are vivid: the cool weight of a stone in hand, the soft splash of water from an ewer, the faint grit of sand scrubbed between fingers. It's a tactile, disciplined world, where hygiene feels like a small prayer. The quirky side shines in the attention to detail. Some stones were polished to a sheen, stored in decorative containers in wealthier homes, a nod to status even in the latrine. Religious texts also mention using odd-numbered stones, 3 or 5, for symbolic reasons, adding a layer of ritual to the act. Imagine a devout scholar, counting his stones with the precision of a mathematician, ensuring his hygiene aligns with faith. And here's another chuckle: picture a kid, tasked with collecting stones, sneaking one to skip across a river, only to hear, "Those are for the latrine, not games." The cultural layer is profound. In Islam, cleanliness is half of faith, as a famous hadith states, and hygiene practices are codified in religious law. Latrines are kept separate from prayer spaces, and water is used whenever possible to maintain ritual purity for salah, prayer. This focus on purity sets the Islamic world apart from Japan's aesthetic hygiene or Europe's rough straw piles, making the act of cleansing a spiritual discipline. The stones and water aren't just tools, they're a bridge to devotion, a daily reminder of faith's role in every detail of life. But there are challenges. Communal latrines, common in bustling cities like Baghdad, are often unsanitary, breeding grounds for disease in a pre-antibiotic world. Stones, if not discarded, could spread germs, and water quality varied. Rivers and wells weren't always pristine. Still, the system is ingenious, leveraging abundant resources like stones and aligning with religious mandates. In coastal regions, like Yemen, shells might replace stones, their smooth curves a local twist. In mountainous areas, clay shards echo ancient Mesopotamia. Wherever you go, the emphasis on purity remains constant. The broader context adds depth. The Islamic world, stretching from Spain to Persia, is a mosaic of cultures, and hygiene practices reflect this diversity. Urban centers with advanced plumbing, like Cordoba, boast sophisticated latrines with running water, while desert nomads rely on portable ewers and stones. The system is adaptable, rooted in a faith that travels with its people. And here's one last chuckle: imagine a traveler, new to the custom, fumbling with his stones, only to drop one mid-wipe, earning a laugh from the locals. "Welcome to Baghdad," they tease. As we leave the tiled latrine, carry the image of that trader, stones in hand, stepping back into the market's bustle under a blazing sun. The Islamic world's hygiene, with its stones and water, is a testament to faith's role in daily life. Next, we'll cross to colonial America, where corncobs and catalogs bring a rugged, New World twist to the story. For now, feel the cool weight of a stone, hear the soft pour of water, and let's glide into the next chapter of this sacred, earthy tale. A crisp autumn breeze rustles the leaves outside a colonial American farmhouse, its wooden walls weathered by New England winters, as a farmer, his hands rough from harvesting corn, ducks into a rickety outhouse, a dried corncob in hand. It's 1750 CE, in the patchwork of colonies from Massachusetts to Virginia, where settlers carve out lives amid forests and fields. The air carries the scent of wood smoke, apples, and the unmistakable tang of a latrine pit, a crude necessity in a world without indoor plumbing. Here, in colonial America, toilet paper is a luxury few can imagine. Instead, people rely on corncobs, leaves, and, in a pinch, scraps of printed catalogs to handle hygiene. It's a rugged, makeshift system, echoing the Mayan cobs but with a frontier twist, far from the ritualistic water of India or the polished sticks of Japan. Mainstream history confirms that corncobs were a staple of colonial American hygiene. Diaries and archaeological finds from sites like Jamestown and Williamsburg reveal latrine pits filled with corncob fragments, their fibrous texture making them a practical choice in a maize-heavy economy. Like their Mayan predecessors, settlers stripped cobs of kernels, dried them, and stored them for bathroom use. Picture a blacksmith, fresh from shoeing horses, squatting over a pit and grabbing a cob from a pile by the outhouse door. The sensation? Rough and scratchy, like scrubbing with a dry sponge, not gentle, but it gets the job done. It's a gritty solution for a gritty life, a step back from China's early paper but perfectly suited to the colony's rural reality. The process is simple but resourceful. Outhouses, often wooden shacks over a cesspit, are shared by families or entire villages. Corncobs are stacked in baskets or hung on strings, ready for use, then tossed into the pit to decompose. In urban areas like Philadelphia, where printing presses churn out almanacs and catalogs, paper scraps become a popular alternative, especially among the wealthy. A quirky tidbit? Old issues of Poor Richard's Almanac or mail-order catalogs were often repurposed for wiping, their pages torn into squares and hung on a nail. Imagine a merchant, flipping through a catalog before tearing out a page for the latrine. Ben Franklin's wit, literally going to waste. Here's a light chuckle. Picture him muttering, "Early to bed, early to rise, and don't forget the catalog." Historians still argue whether corn cobs were universal across the colonies or if class and region dictated alternatives. Did urban elites, with access to printed materials, shun cobs for paper, while rural farmers stuck to what grew in their fields? The debate lingers, as colonial records, like diaries or letters, rarely detail such intimate habits. Yet, the abundance of corncob remnants in rural latrines and paper scraps in city ones suggests a divide: cobs for the countryside, paper for the towns. The frontier's diversity shaped its hygiene, blending old-world habits with new-world necessities. Let's set the scene. The outhouse is a drafty shack, its planks creaking underfoot, the pit below a dark, odorous void. A seamstress, her fingers pricked from sewing, steps in, grabbing a corncob from a burlap sack. The air is thick with the latrine stench, tempered by the crisp scent of fallen leaves and the distant crackle of a hearth fire. She wipes, tosses the cob into the pit, and rinses her hands in a bucket of well water, if she's lucky. The soundscape is raw: the groan of the outhouse door, the dry rustle of cobs, the faint clatter of a horse cart passing by. It's a world where hygiene is a chore, woven into the hardscrabble rhythm of colonial life. A modern aside: ever grabbed a paper towel in a pinch and cringed at its roughness? That's the colonial vibe, but with higher stakes. Corn cobs were free, abundant, and tied to the harvest, making them a natural choice. The catch? They could be abrasive, especially if not dried properly, and splinters weren't uncommon. Paper scraps, while softer, were a luxury, and in rural areas, they were as rare as a warm winter. Plus, outhouses were breeding grounds for flies and bacteria, especially in humid summers. Still, the system worked, turning farm byproducts and printed pages into tools for survival. Leaves and straw play a supporting role, especially in areas with sparse cornfields. Oak, maple, or chestnut leaves, soft when fresh, are plucked from trees or gathered in piles, their waxy texture a decent stand-in for cobs. Straw, borrowed from barns, is used in colder months when leaves are scarce. Picture a school teacher, pausing by the outhouse, grabbing a handful of maple leaves, their faint autumnal scent a small comfort. The sensory details are vivid: the fibrous scrape of a corncob, the crinkle of a catalog page, the cold splash of water from a tin bucket. It's a tactile, rugged world, where hygiene feels like a small victory over the frontier's harshness. The quirky side shines in the use of printed materials. In wealthier homes or taverns, almanacs, newspapers, and even Bible pages, gasp, were torn up for wiping, a practice that raised eyebrows among the pious. Imagine a preacher, wincing as he uses a page from Psalms, muttering, "Forgive me, Lord, but it's softer than a cob." In rural areas, corncobs were sometimes soaked in water for a less abrasive wipe, a trick borrowed from Mayan practices. And here's another chuckle: picture a kid, tasked with tearing catalog pages, sneaking a peek at the latest gadgets, only to hear, "Those are for the outhouse, not daydreaming." The cultural layer adds depth. Colonial America, a melting pot of European, Native, and African influences, has no unified hygiene standard. Native Americans, like the Iroquois, often used corncobs or leaves, influencing settlers' habits. Puritans, with their focus on thrift, saw cobs and scraps as practical, while wealthier Anglicans in Virginia might import cloth or paper. Outhouses reflect this diversity: crude in frontier cabins, slightly fancier in city taverns with nailed-up almanac pages. Hygiene isn't a priority in a world of smallpox and harsh winters, but it's a necessity, handled with whatever's at hand. The downsides are stark. Outhouses, often unventilated, are smelly and unsanitary, especially in summer when flies swarm. Corncobs can irritate skin, and paper scraps, if reused, spread germs. In crowded towns, cesspits overflow, and clean water for rinsing is a luxury. Still, there's ingenuity here. Settlers took the Myers corncob idea and paired it with the printed word, creating a system that's both practical and distinctly American. It's a far cry from Japan's elegant chugi or India's ritualistic water, but it's a snapshot of a young, scrappy society making do. The broader context adds flavor. By the 18th century, America's growing print culture, almanacs, pamphlets, catalogs, starts to shift hygiene habits, at least in cities. Rural areas, however, cling to cobs and leaves, their reliance on the land echoing earlier cultures. The mix of old and new, native and settler, creates a patchwork of practices, as diverse as the colonies themselves. And here's one last chuckle. Imagine a settler, proudly showing off his new Sears catalog, only to see his wife rip out pages for the outhouse. Progress, he'd sigh, shaking his head. As we leave the creaky outhouse, carry the image of that farmer, corncob in hand, trudging back to the fields under a harvest moon. Colonial America's hygiene, with its cobs and catalogs, is a testament to frontier grit and adaptability. Next, we'll leap to Victorian England, where mass-produced paper finally brings toilet paper into the modern age. For now, feel the rough scrape of a corncob, hear the rustle of a torn page, and let's drift into the next chapter of this rugged, patchwork tale. A gas lamp flickers in a bustling London townhouse, its polished mahogany walls glowing softly, as a governess, her skirts rustling, steps into a tiled water closet, reaching for a neatly cut square of tissue paper from a brass dispenser. It's 1880 CE, in the heart of Victorian England, where steam engines roar and the British Empire spans the globe. The air carries the scent of lavender soap, coal dust, and the faint, clean whiff of a modern flush toilet, a marvel of engineering tucked discreetly behind a frosted glass door. Here, in an era of progress and propriety, toilet paper finally emerges as a mass-produced staple, transforming hygiene from the makeshift cobs of colonial America or the ritualistic stones of the Islamic world into a commercial triumph. It's a soft, revolutionary leap, but one still tangled in class, innovation, and a touch of Victorian prudery. Mainstream history credits the mid-19th century with the widespread adoption of toilet paper in Western societies, particularly in Britain and America. Patents filed in the 1850s, like Joseph Gaiety's form medicated paper in 1857, marked the start, but it's the 1880s when companies like the Scott Paper Company and British Perforated Paper Company mass-produce rolls, making them affordable. Factories churn out soft, pliable sheets, often packaged in discrete boxes or perforated rolls for ease of use. Picture a merchant, fresh from a stock exchange, sitting in a porcelain water closet, tearing off a square of tissue. The sensation? Smooth and absorbent, like wiping with a thin cotton cloth, luxurious compared to American corncobs, a world away from Japan's chuggy sticks. The process is a blend of technology and etiquette. Water closets, equipped with flush valves and ceramic bowls, replace outhouses in urban homes, their pipes connected to new sewer systems. Toilet paper, cut into sheets or rolled, is stored in dispensers or stacked on shelves, a symbol of modernity. After use, it's flushed away, a far cry from tossing cobs into a pit. A quirky tidbit? Early toilet paper wasn't always soft, some brands were splintery, prompting complaints in letters to manufacturers. Imagine a lord, wincing as he uses a rough sheet, muttering, "This paper's more punishment than progress." Here's a light chuckle. Picture him writing a stern letter to the Scott Company, demanding a gentler wipe for the gentry. Historians still argue whether toilet paper's adoption was driven by sanitation or social status. Did the working class, with limited access to plumbing, stick to older methods like rags or newspapers, while the bourgeoisie flaunted their paper rolls? The debate lingers, as Victorian advertisements focus on elite consumers, but sales records show growing demand across classes by the 1890s. The shift wasn't universal. Rural areas and poorer households lagged, clinging to scraps or leaves, but urban centers led the charge, propelled by sanitation reforms and a cultural obsession with cleanliness. Let's set the scene. The water closet is a small, elegant room, its walls papered in floral patterns, the toilet gleaming under a skylight. A seamstress, her hands calloused from needlework, steps in, tearing a sheet from a roll embossed with the maker's crest. The air is clean, tinged with the metallic tang of pipes and the faint sweetness of a lavender sachet. She wipes, flushes the paper away with a satisfying gurgle, and washes her hands in a china basin. The soundscape is refined, the soft rustle of paper, the clank of the flush valve, the distant clatter of horse-drawn cabs outside. It's a world where hygiene feels like a badge of progress, a small act of civilization in a rapidly changing era. A modern aside, ever unrolled a fresh TP roll and felt a twinge of satisfaction? That's the Victorian vibe, but with a dose of novelty. Toilet paper was a game changer, cheap enough for mass use yet fancy enough to signal status. The catch? Early rolls could tear unevenly, and some brands used harsh dyes or chemicals, irritating skin. Plus, water closets were a luxury. Many tenements still shared communal privies, where paper was a rare treat. Still, the system marked a leap, turning hygiene into a commercial product for the first time. Alternatives linger, especially among the poor. Newspapers, catalogs, and cloth rags, echoes of colonial America, are common in households without access to rolls. In rural areas, leaves or straw persist, a nod to medieval Europe's rougher days. Picture a dock worker, in a shared privy, using a torn page from the Times, its ink smudging his fingers. The sensory details are vivid: the crinkle of tissue paper, the cold porcelain of a toilet seat, the faint creak of a brass dispenser. It's a tactile, modern world, where hygiene feels like a step toward respectability, even if it's not yet universal. The quirky side shines in Victorian marketing. Companies pitch toilet paper with euphemisms like curl papers or sanitary sheets, avoiding direct mention of its purpose in a prudish era. Ads boasted of medicated or perfumed papers, appealing to health-conscious consumers. Imagine a lady, browsing a chemist's shop, selecting a box of rose-scented hygienic paper, as if it's a fine perfume. Some rolls even came with printed patterns or mottos, a peculiar touch of decorum. And here's another chuckle: picture a child, sneaking a sheet to doodle on, only to hear, "That's for the water closet, not your sketches." The cultural layer runs deep. Victorian England, obsessed with hygiene after cholera outbreaks, sees toilet paper as part of a broader sanitation revolution. Public health campaigns, led by figures like Edwin Chadwick, push for clean water, source, and personal cleanliness, aligning with a middle-class ideal of respectability. Water closets and paper rolls are status symbols, separating the civilized from the unwashed. This contrasts sharply with the spiritual purity of Islamic stones or Japan's aesthetic chugi, framing hygiene as a secular, industrial triumph. The roll isn't just a tool, it's a marker of progress, a small act of superiority in a class-conscious world. But there are hurdles. Toilet paper is still costly for many, and rural areas lack the plumbing to make it practical. Communal privies, common in slums, are filthy, and paper often runs out, forcing a return to rags or worse. Early manufacturing sometimes cuts corners, splinters or chemical residues plague cheaper brands, and perforated rolls jam or tear. Still, the ingenuity is undeniable. Factories harness steam power to produce paper at scale, and entrepreneurs like the Scott brothers turn a taboo product into a household name. It's a far cry from hand-carved chugi or river-wash stones, but it's a pivot toward the modern bathroom. The broader context adds flavor. By the 1880s, toilet paper spreads beyond Britain to America and Europe, though adoption varies. In France, bidets compete with paper, echoing India's water-based ways. In America, Sears catalogs still double as wipes in rural homes, a holdover from colonial days. The global trade in wood pulp, from Canada to Scandinavia, fuels the paper boom, tying hygiene to empire and industry. And here's one last chuckle: imagine a Victorian inventor, proudly unveiling a self-perforating toilet roll, only to watch it unravel in a gust of wind. Back to the drawing board, he'd sigh, brushing paper scraps from his coat. As we leave the tiled water closet, carry the image of that governess, tissue in hand, stepping back into the gaslit hall with a quiet nod to progress. Victorian toilet paper, with its rolls and flush valves, marks a turning point, blending industry with intimacy. Next, we'll reflect on how these ancient practices echo in today's hygiene debates, tying past to present in a soft, crinkly thread. For now, feel the smooth glide of paper, hear the gurgle of a flush, and let's drift into the final chapter of this modern, transformative tale. The glow of a modern bathroom light hums softly, casting a warm sheen over a tiled floor, as a weary commuter, fresh from a long day, reaches for a roll of double-ply toilet paper in a sleek, suburban home. It's 2025, and in a world of smartphones and flush valves, the humble roll reigns supreme, a distant descendant of the stones, sticks, and cobs of ancient times. The air carries the faint scent of lavender air freshener, mingling with the clean, clinical whiff of a porcelain toilet, a far cry from the earthy latrines of Viking longhouses or Mayan jungles. Here, we pause to reflect on how ancient hygiene practices, those gritty, ingenious solutions from Mesopotamia to colonial America, echo in today's debates over sustainability, luxury, and the global toilet paper craze. It's a story of progress, but one that loops back to the same human needs, tying past to present with a soft, crinkly thread. Mainstream history shows that toilet paper, as we know it, is a recent triumph, born in the Victorian era but perfected in the 20th century with advances in manufacturing and sanitation. By the 1920s, brands like Charmin and Scott had made soft, perforated rolls a household staple in the West, while innovations like flushable pipes spread globally. Today, the average American uses about 20,000 sheets a year, a statistic that would make a Mesopotamian clay scraper blush. Picture a student, scrolling through social media in a fluorescent-lit bathroom, tearing off a few squares of quilted TP. The sensation? Plush and effortless, like wiping with a cloud, a world apart from the rough corncobs of colonial America or the ritualistic water of ancient India. The modern bathroom is a marvel of convenience. Toilets flush with a satisfying whoosh, rolls are dispensed from wall-mounted holders, and scented or aloe-infused options cater to every preference. The process is second nature: wipe, flush, wash hands, repeat. But echoes of the past linger. A quirky tidbit? During the 2020 toilet paper shortages, sparked by pandemic panic buying, some folks resorted to napkins, rags, or even leaves, reviving colonial America's makeshift spirit. Imagine a suburban dad, eyeing his backyard oak tree, muttering, "Guess it's 1750 again." Here's a light chuckle. Picture him trying to explain to his kids why he's hoarding paper towels like they're gold. Historians still argue whether modern toilet paper's dominance is a triumph of hygiene or a cultural quirk of the West. In regions like India and the Middle East, bidets and water-based cleansing remain popular, echoing ancient practices, while Japan's high-tech washlets blend Chugi-era precision with futuristic sprays. Is toilet paper's global spread a sign of progress, or does it reflect Western bias in sanitation standards? The debate persists, fueled by environmental concerns. Deforestation for pulp and water-intensive production raise questions about sustainability that ancient cultures, with their reusable sticks and stones, sidestepped. Let's set the scene. The bathroom is a clean, tiled haven, its mirror fogged from a recent shower. A nurse, her scrubs tossed in a hamper, sits on a gleaming toilet, tearing off a strip of ultra-soft TP. The air is fresh, thanks to a humming vent, with a faint citrus tang from a soap dispenser. She wipes, flushes, and washes her hands under a sensor-activated faucet, the act as routine as breathing. The soundscape is modern, the gurgle of the flush, the soft rip of perforated paper, the distant hum of a TV in the living room. It's a world where hygiene feels effortless, a quiet luxury built on centuries of trial and error. A modern aside: ever panicked when the TP runs out and grabbed a tissue or, admit it, a random cloth? That's the ancient spirit, alive and well. Toilet paper is convenient, but its ubiquity masks a fragility. Supply chain disruptions or environmental costs can send us scrambling, just like a Viking reaching for a spare pelt. The catch? Modern TP is resource-heavy, with billions of rolls produced yearly, straining forests and water supplies. Plus, in public restrooms, thin, single-ply sheets can feel like a betrayal, a nod to the splintery papers of Victorian days. Still, the system is a triumph, making hygiene accessible in ways ancient peoples could only dream of. The past echoes in surprising ways. Reusable cloth wipes, gaining traction among eco-conscious consumers, recall the linen scraps of ancient Egypt or the wool rags of medieval elites. Bidets, popular in Europe and Asia, mirror India's Lota or Rome's water-soaked sponges, blending old wisdom with new tech. Even corncobs make a cameo. Some survivalists and off-grid communities still use them, a nod to Mayan and colonial ingenuity. The sensory details are vivid: the plush glide of double-ply, the cool spray of a bidet, the faint crinkle of a roll spinning on its holder. It's a comfortable, familiar world, but one that hums with the ghosts of ancient latrines. The quirky side shines in modern TP culture. Luxury brands offer bamboo or recycled rolls, marketed with buzzwords like sustainable or biodegradable, while novelty rolls printed with cartoons or political slogans echo Japan's poetic chugi. Social media fuels TP debates, from memes about hoarding to influencers touting bidet conversions. Imagine a TikToker, filming a zero-waste bathroom tutorial, proudly showing off cloth wipes like they're Viking pelts reborn. And here's another chuckle: picture a family, mid-shortage, arguing over who gets the last square, as if it's a Roman spongia passed down the latrine bench. The cultural layer runs deep. In the West, toilet paper is a symbol of comfort and cleanliness, tied to ideals of progress and privacy. But globally, it's not universal. Over 1 billion people lack access to modern sanitation, relying on methods not unlike those of ancient India or the Islamic world. Environmentalists push for alternatives, citing the 15 million trees felled annually for TP production, while cultural preferences shape usage: Japan's washlets, India's bidets, America's obsession with quilted rolls. Hygiene remains a human universal, but its tools reflect local values, just as they did in Mesopotamian villages or Mayan cities. The challenges are real. Toilet paper's environmental toll, deforestation, water use, plastic packaging, sparks debates about sustainability, echoing ancient reliance on renewable resources like reeds or stones. Supply chain hiccups, like those in 2020, reveal our dependence on this seemingly trivial product. Yet, there's ingenuity here. Innovations like bamboo teepee or waterless toilets aim to blend modern comfort with ancient pragmatism, proving we're still solving the same problems as our ancestors, just with shinier tools. And here's one last chuckle. Imagine a futurist, pitching a smart teepee roll that tracks usage, only to see it glitch mid-flush. Back to leaves, they'd sigh, shaking their head. As the bathroom light dims, the commuter steps out, the roll a little lighter, the world a little quieter. The journey from clay shards to plush rolls is a testament to human adaptability, but it's not the end. The past whispers in every wipe, Mesopotamia's grit, Rome's sponges, Japan's precision, all leading to this moment of modern ease. Let's slow now, the air growing softer, the hum of the fan a gentle lullaby. Picture a quiet night, the stars above as eternal as those over a Sumerian latrine, each solution a small act of survival, of humanity finding its way. Close your eyes, let the day slip away, and rest in the rhythm of history's long, winding path. Sweet dreams, you time travelers, until the next tale calls.